Hi everyone, my name is Tom Seto and I'm Director of Advertising at Net Natives. Today I'll be covering four huge areas. This will not be a deep dive, but if anything comes out that you want to know more about, please do reach out as I'm more than happy to go into detail. Today I'll cover what's happening in news and culture, what's impacting marketing and advertising, iOS 14.5 and a slightly different take on what I think is actually going on, a small and light overview of third-party cookies, and then we'll have a look at the four things that are happening in culture right now that I think we in the education sector should be acting on in order to continue to future-proof the performance of your advertising. Firstly, I want to step out of the day-to-day and spend a few slides looking at the wider picture. Trust is critical, and the pandemic has put the establishments to the test. And when looking at the last 7 years of companies based in the four locations indicated on the slides, it is currently at a record low. As you can see, China has bucked this trend. However, it is significantly lower than all the rest. This lack of trust is also seen in information sources that people use. And this is probably expected when you consider the pandemic. People were nervous, they were looking for help and advice. And on top of the situation being, super complicated, there was lots of contradictory pieces of information. And this has caused the trust to fade. I thought it was also interesting to note that through our own student pulse, we have been looking at sources prospective students are using. Unsurprisingly, universities' websites sit at the very top, with search engines following up second. But the continued focus on the web experience is still critical. This graphic shows a quick look across the globe at the trust in media. No one channel wins out globally. In fact, in the US, as in the UK, trust is maintained with the traditional older channels, the reliable TV and radio for NBC as well, with NBC and ITV topping out. However, when you look at the actual usage of digital channels, there is significant growth across the board. The lack of trust is most definitely not linked to the engagement or the use. Facebook, you'll notice, is flat in terms of growth over the last few years. But I would add that this lack of growth is not seen in their revenues. They continue to grow healthily quarter on quarter on quarter, hitting a high at the end of 2020 of $53 average revenue per user. They also have 2.72 billion active people across all channels, so they're doing just fine. But what does this kind of slightly complicated picture mean for marketers? Well, optimism is the third highest since it started being tracked in 2009. One thing I wanted to point out here that in general, optimism is high, and it's high with the biggest revenue earning companies such as pharma and biotech. But when looking at education, it's actually surprisingly low, with only mining and construction industries coming in under. So this graph here looks at the aggressive growth that we've seen across digital ad spending, and then forecast through to the end of 2024, thanks to eMarketer. And you can see the whole cord cutting of traditional channels is causing a huge problem for big traditional media buying agencies. And those big, broad media buys brought in advance and forced out to their clients, scoring loads of commission and ski holidays for agencies, are really becoming a thing of the past. And the efficiency that digital provides is winning out. And there's been a challenge for creativity, and that's not linked just to agencies, but in general, it's hard to be creative and stand out from your competitors when everyone is looking in the same place. I think this was most easily referenced at the midpoint of last year when a whole new swathe of new TV adverts coming out, all largely looking, sounding and saying the same thing. Creative thinking has had to double down, and the opening up of the environments, both in offices but also outside, and the removal of lockdowns in most nations is going to be a good thing, and it's going to make sure that people can get out and experience the world a bit more. Now, it's super important to look at the understanding of your audience and making sure we've got really effective segmentation. Lots of marketing we see nowadays is marketed at generational groups, but we have to be more nuanced. An easy example here is seen where you've got Prince George, the future king, and Lil Pump, who are both Gen Z. but you have to admit that the marketing you would take to engage them would be really different. They're only united in the fact that they were born within 16 years of each other. In addition to this, you can see recent research on the right-hand side that looks at the strength of cohesion in groups and really put these generational groupings to the test. The results of the survey found that there are greater bonds between people who floss their teeth, or people who drink Orangina, who eat nuts on a daily basis, rather than within Generation Z. So now shifting gears a little bit and moving to, what's the impact in media? And so when you look at what we think of as big media, you've got these big 5 companies. And in the first quarter of this year, still within the pandemic, they made $321 billion. They were 41% up year on year, phenomenal, staggering growth. And when you break it down and look on this slide, you can see those 5 companies. Pink shows 2020's revenue and 2021 is shown in black. Amazon are huge, and more of that shortly, but all of them have had, bumper starts to the year. So could Amazon take the crown? I mean, very much so. The strength of their first-party data. And also when you look at the size and the growth of what's happened over the last year, 1/3 of all parcel deliveries were done by Amazon, and with their first-party data and their network and their infrastructure and, from the standard channel, but also other platforms such as IMDb, they stand in a very strong position. So next up is TikTok. It would be wrong of me in an advertising presentation in 2021 to not mention TikTok. Of course, it's booming. It's actually my favorite social network, definitely reinforcing that failure of generational targeting. But I might be an anomaly. But TikTok has hit the top of the global ad equity ratings, which shows which ads the consumers actually value. They are, of course, still in a honeymoon period. But the way the platform has been built has meant advertising on it has had to be more entertaining and innovative, as you can see on the chart on the right, which shows all the benefits of TikTok, what's seen in terms of value, but also versus the rest. So in summary of this first section, trust in the establishment is really low. People are skeptical of the information that they see. Use in platforms is an absolute all-time high and growing and continuing to grow. And what the walled gardens, well, their walls are getting significantly higher. So let's have a look at iOS 14.5. It's been in the news and everywhere else. And I thought it would be interesting today to talk about a slightly different theory, because I'm not sure that Apple's move is purely based on altruistic values. And let me explain. I'll go back a little bit. So Apple launched the iPod, fantastic. I actually had exactly the iPod that Steve Jobs is holding in his hand there. But this made them a dominant force in the music industry, and it actually changed the music industry for the better. But now this industry, with the growth of Pandora and Spotify, has gone from download to streaming. And Apple have launched a kind of fairly average product for streaming, but they have not prioritized this in terms of their development. And therefore, they don't matter much in music. But when you have a look at another side of Apple, who needs music when you've got an app store? So when you look back to 2008, you can see that the reason for the commission payment, which is actually 30%, was there to cover running costs. 12, 13 years on down the line, those revenues are now 15 billion. What actually has happened is Apple have created a new gaming platform. Now add that to the revenue they get from search. And when you just look at the one payment that Google gave Apple last year at 10 billion, Apple are at 25 billion, just on search and just on the App Store. And to give that a bit more perspective, if you have a look at Netflix, who've seen huge growth, they made a similar amount, 25 billion, but they had to invest 15 billion of that in buying and creating the content. So missing out on music streaming has not been too much of an issue at Apple. So what is behind the launch of the iOS 14? There are numerous benefits, unlocking things with a face mask, Siri has a new voice, but the impact to advertising is this. If a user opts in to app tracking, Facebook will be able to track 8 events or conversions per domain, and those are ranked by priority. If a user opts out, Facebook will only be able to track the event of the highest priority. So that is a huge impact to Facebook, one of the channels that provides the best tracking from a walled garden. And so they're really pulling back and really taking hold of this market. And they've demonstrated that in the launch of this TV ad.
There you go.
Here's what you said last time. She'll help with the itching.
Can I have a taste of your ice cream? Can you hear those people behind me? Why don't you mind your own business?
Yeah, a great ad, and coming from Apple, they're really focusing on the benefits of the user, but I think there are other values. Let's have a look who's actually opting into app tracking on iOS 14. So on the left of the screen now, you can see worldwide it's at 15%, but actually for the US market, that's very, very low at 6%. And that is largely due to low adoption rate, but also where apps haven't fully updated their app, and also where the change in the market as it goes through. So on to the next slide. Is this actually Apple's next big thing? Have they taken an approach that they did with where they revolutionized the music industry and taken that and brought that into online advertising? I would definitely argue that online advertising needs a bit more structure outside of the walled gardens. And so what's happened is you've had this collision of privacy into the advertising and advertising market, and it's absolutely shattered everything. One thing I would like to add, though, is that the mobile advertising industry is worth 189 billion. So that's just mobile. And so Apple have definitely got a big game to play here. I wanted to point out at this stage, it's absolutely critical, particularly when we look back at Facebook, that you make sure that you've got your 8 conversions agreed across your institution. Opt-in rate for app tracking is very, very low. We want to be able to get as much information as we can through Facebook and the impact of iOS 14. So on to third-party cookies. Cookies fuel like a huge part of the digital advertising ecosystem today, and following the Google announcement, a totally cookieless, third-party cookieless future awaits. Google Chrome owns 62.5% of the market, and at the start of 2022, third-party cookies will be gone. There are rumors going around that this will actually slip because of the significant change and because of the lack of clarity of stuff that's actually going to happen for it. But don't count on it. Let's have a look. So actually, I thought it would be good at this point to explain what cookies actually are. They are basic files that are saved in your browser. They have a name and a value, which shows the domain, the website they've come from, and they also have an expiry date. But what actually do they do? And so what's the difference between first party and third party? So on the screen now, you can see first party. They enable a load of useful things, really beneficial, such as speedy sign-in, web analytics, and a quick checkout. And they're only available on a site that owns the cookie, but they are available on all browsers. Third-party cookies enable ad tracking and the ability to create and retarget users, create retargeting audiences. Lots of people can actually see them, but they are most significantly on their way out. So what does this mean for organizations? Well, actually, some recent research has shown that 63% of organizations are just not set up for this, but there are some important points. You should be investing in, you should be investing in first-party data. You'll notice on every e-commerce site you go to now, they're offering discounts if you sign up to newsletters. This is all part and parcel of a first-party data strategy. There are lots of options going forward, such as contextual advertising, which can change ads based on context or content of the sites. There isn't much time in terms of January is definitely just around the corner, but there is enough time to put together a really solid plan. I thought at this point, it would be really good for me to talk about our student network. And we're keen to improve the quality of display and have launched our student network. As part of this, we only buy on premium sites. We will measure the impact of applications enrollment using our Akiro platform, as well as the standards, impressions and clicks. We're going to challenge the industry to operate better, and we are voluntarily members of the Conscious Advertising Network, which is created to ensure the ethics in the industry are right. In short, your brand will reach real people. So in summary, the online advertising industry has collided head-on with privacy and absolutely shattered. And there is a lack of clarity looking forward. That said, there is huge amounts of money at stake, as I've highlighted as we've gone through, and clarity is getting better and improving. Apple and Amazon are most definitely poised to take an absolutely enormous slice of the pie. Small brands can and should leverage the benefits of the walled gardens to enable their growth. There is definitely room to just exist if you are a tiny brand within those walls. Bigger brands will need to look outside, and the student network offers an effective, ethical, brand-safe approach to do this. So that's iOS 14 and deprecation of third-party cookies. So let's move into something more interesting, more fun, and have a little bit of a look forward. So at the start of 2020, we talked about, within a few blogs, the growth of gaming, and that absolutely continues at pace. And 200 billion is the estimated value of the market by 2023. And there are very few brands taking advantage of this. You know, it is expensive. There is a few blockers here. But there are some really interesting options that we can look at. And as we continue to see this shift of where people engage, you know, away from traditional channels, that cord cutting thought process, and into channels such as gaming, in order to engage with your key audiences, you will need to think about how you're going to feature and what you're going to do with gaming strategy. So number two, the donut. The growth of available near me searches has absolutely skyrocketed. People are now more connected to their local community. They've all spent a lot of time within their local communities of recent, and taking advantage of that is, you know, is key. I expect to see some really great examples of highly engaging uses of channels such as digital out of home. And there's a super smart example that you can see here on the bottom of my screen with NYC covering the charging stations with, in NYC, sorry, looking at the charging stations for phones for an MHA program that's looking at being close to medical and healthcare providers. So the third one is audio. It's huge. I mean, 40% of the US population have audio assistants. I actually have one over my shoulder. Amazon Alexa has a director of trust. I mean, the investment going into this area is enormous. Spotify have paid outrageous amounts of money to trending podcast owners such as Rogan. Brands are experimenting with voice responses and also sonic branding as well. It has great targeting options. It's cost effective and there's loads of inventory available. You know, but the things to think about are like, what are the new moments that you can find to get more people engaged with your brand? Develop an audio strategy to cover voice, podcasting, and advertising. So lastly, the camera. It's having a bit of a renaissance. Now that the technological infrastructure is in place, AR and QR are surging. I mean, if you have a look at Pokemon Go, traditionally an out-of-home experience, during lockdown last year, they pivoted their model to deliver at-home experiences and had a bumpy year. And QR codes, the ones you can see on the right-hand side, have been around a significant amount of time, but are now used all over the place. And for engagement with ads, people are checking in, ordering drinks and food, and this behavior is now, accepted as the normal. And as you can see from the Burger King example, there are some really simple but highly engaging executions that you can use. So the output here is, what experiences or activities that you do could be enhanced by AR and QR. So in summary to these new trends, to be able to take advantage of these new initiatives or new innovations, we need to think about how is your team structures? What are the capabilities you have or don't have? Boston Consulting Group, in their report about overcoming this innovation readiness gap, stated that only 20% of businesses are ready and equipped to actually innovate. But it also pointed out that those businesses who did innovate, grew at a much faster rate than those who didn't. So things you need to do: create a trend map for your organization. Do have a look at how you can pull that innovation, those new initiatives, out of your BAU to make sure that they are actually delivered and not deprioritized. Do reach out for us to help. We'd be super happy to help. So that's all my slides. I hope you found them interesting, useful, and please do get in touch. And thanks for your time.